Good morning, class. We have a new student joining us today. I'm Joseph. This is Input English. For those of you joining us for the first time, the Input English channel is dedicated to providing content for comprehensible input. This is all about input for learning English. This channel has a lot of different kinds of episodes for you to watch and use as comprehensible input. If you're new to comprehensible input, I made a lot of videos that explain how it works, how you can take advantage of this resource and improve your English. So let's get started with the story. I started out with the words of the teacher. This is the teacher of Craig's 6th grade class. It's first thing in the morning on a Monday, and the teacher has just said good morning to the class and announced that they have a new student. Indeed, there is a new student seated in the front row. She introduced him to the class. She said, "Class, this is Rusty, and he has just moved into the area with his family, and he will be in our class. I'm going to ask Rusty to introduce himself." With that, the boy in the front row, who no one knew, stood and faced the class. He was a little taller than the other kids, slender, and well-dressed. He had red hair, but no freckles. He appeared to be comfortable talking to the class. Craig was thinking he would be nervous if he was forced to introduce himself to the whole class, standing in front of them like that. Rusty said that his name was John Calvin Wilson, but that everybody calls him Rusty. He pointed to his red hair, said, "Because of this." He went on to explain that his father, also named John, also has red hair. But when his father was in the army, everybody called him Red. Nobody called him John. Now that his dad is out of the army, everybody calls him John. Rusty explained that he had just moved there with his family from Miami. He grew up in Coral Gables, which is one of the smaller areas within Greater Miami, and they moved because his dad got a new job. His mom expects to get a new job pretty soon. Rusty told everyone that he has a younger sister, but she's only 4. He didn't mention her name. With that, the teacher thanked him and pointed out that there would be plenty of time during the rest of the school year for everybody to get to know each other. But the introduction was made. The teacher now turned her attention to the history class, and they began discussing the Roman Empire. At lunch that day, Rusty sat down in the middle of a big table and found himself surrounded by the other boys in his class. It seems that everybody was interested in learning more about this new kid in the class. Craig found himself seated across the table so he could hear what was being said easily. Craig decided to mostly listen because Rusty was getting peppered with questions from all sides. The other boys wanted to know what it was like growing up in Miami. Soon, one of them asked if he'd been through a hurricane. On this, Rusty was quite honest. He said there haven't been any recent hurricanes that really directly hit Miami, so he'd never experienced a hurricane in person. But they had experienced a lot of tropical storms, that is, high winds, rain, and lightning, but not with the force of a hurricane. He then began to tell a story about how he and a few of his friends were outside during a tropical storm. The rain had tapered off, but it was very windy. They were in the backyard of his house. One of the boys suggested that they might be able to use the lids of the trash cans to fly, given how strong the wind was. These boys thought that was a great idea. So they took the lids off of the trash cans and quickly found that they could stand on the short wall, which was about 3 feet tall. This wall was between the 2 yards, between Rusty's house and the neighbor's house. The wind was coming across the wall perpendicular, that is at a 90-degree angle, perpendicular. So the first boy stood on the wall, held out the trash can lids with his arms extended to the side, and jumped off the wall. He had timed his jump for a time that the wind was very slack. There was no real wind, and so he simply jumped off the wall. Nothing happened. This was analyzed by the other boys, and they were determined to get a good flight out of this. The next boy took his turn, and similarly, not much happened. He wound up standing in the neighbor's yard, holding 2 trash can lids, and his flight, which he so much wanted, was about 1 foot long. These boys could easily jump 1 foot. On the third try, the boy faced into the wind and jumped forward, holding the 2 trash can lids out to the side, but the wind caught him and blew him backward into Rusty's yard, and he landed on his back. He got mud and grass stains all over the back of his clothes, but he did fly several feet in the wrong direction. Now, Rusty was learning from all of this. He had seen a bunch of failed attempts, so he had learned that he wanted to face away from the wind so that he would be going forward. He wanted to put his arms up to catch the wind and maybe tilt the trash can lids forward a little bit so that it would give him some propulsion. He wanted to be pushed into his yard. He wanted to time his jump to when the wind was very strong. So now it was Rusty's turn. He climbed up on this short wall and balanced carefully. He held the trash can lids down and waited for the wind to start to build. He wanted to catch a good gust. When he thought the time was right, in one motion, he extended his arms up and jumped straight up. The wind caught him as planned. It lifted him as planned. It propelled him forward as planned, and he landed in his own yard. When he landed, he fell forward, and he wound up with mud and grass stains on his knees and his hands. No injuries occurred. The ground was so saturated with water and the grass was so thick that it was like landing on a soft pillow, a very muddy green soft pillow. Rusty gathered himself up after his landing and rejoined the boys. He was victorious. He had done exactly what he wanted to do, and no injuries occurred. By chance, Rusty's mom glanced out the window as he took flight. She saw the whole thing. She looked in horror, seeing her son perched on a wall with garbage can lids, and she was certain he was going to be severely injured. She didn't have time to stop him. As soon as she saw him, he jumped, and the wind picked him up and carried him. Rusty was already standing and obviously not hurt by the time she got outside. She started yelling at him, pointing out that what he was doing was completely unsafe and that they needed to stop doing this. She told the other boys that it was time to go home. The storm is building and they need to get indoors. She told Rusty to put the garbage can lids back where they belong and come in the house. He needed to get cleaned up. By the time he had come into the house, she had simmered down quite a bit. She said, "I'm sorry for yelling at you. You just scared me." Rusty said, "It's okay, Mom. I understand." The day after Rusty's famous flight, he got a tape measure and measured the distance from the wall to where his feet scuffed the grass. The grass was damaged by his landing, and the mark was easy to find. He measured that distance, and it measured 15 feet 8 inches. Rusty was very proud of his flight, but his mom had extracted a promise from him that he would never do anything that dangerous again. The boys had lots of questions for Rusty. The lunch period flew past them, and it was time for them to go back to class. It became clear that the new kid in the class, Rusty, had a lot of stories to entertain his classmates as he gets to know them. I invite comments below, and if you like videos like this, be sure to click on this one next. See you soon.